What's up everybody, KTM Mike here, and today I'm going to be doing a review of my 2017 KTM Super Duke. I'll start the video off by saying that if you're considering a Super Duke, it has its flaws, but I still think that you should go and at least own one, at least once. Test ride it if nothing else, because this LC8 motor is absolutely fantastic. There's torque everywhere, and if you watch any review on this motorcycle, that's all they can talk about, and it's because it's intoxicating. So if you're considering purchasing one, just go ahead and do it, just to say that you've at least owned it and you know what it's like. That being said, it has its issues. Some people's KTMs are completely faultless with zero issues at all. Others, like mine, constantly have issues. They're small issues, but they constantly have problems. So if you can look past those problems, it is an absolutely fantastic motorcycle, and I don't think you'll honestly be disappointed. With that being said, let's get into this. So I purchased this motorcycle on Halloween of 2020 with 4,400 miles. It is currently June 30th at the time of recording this, and the bike has about 14,500 miles. So in that short amount of time, I've put a little over 10,000 miles on the motorcycle, and I feel like that's enough time to be able to accurately collect my thoughts and describe them to you. I'm not going to bore you with specs and everything else, because A, you can Google that, and B, literally every other review covers it. So I'm not going to talk about that. Instead, I'm going to try to talk about what the bike is like to live with. I ride year-round. If you're somebody else who rides year-round, this motorcycle can be a little finicky to start in the cold weather. In fact, the KTM manual recommends starting it or running the engine 7 degrees Celsius. That's 44 degrees Fahrenheit and up. So when I was riding, in the winter this year, where I am, it does routinely get below 44 degrees. And when I'm commuting on the bike, it took a couple times to start in the really cold. So I started noticing problems like below 40 Fahrenheit or 4 degrees Celsius. So I started really noticing problems then with it trying to start. It would take, 3 or 4 attempts before it would even start. And it's not that it's a reliability problem, it's just that it's cold as shit and the motor doesn't like being started that cold. So it's by no means a reliability problem. My MT-10 had the same issue. It's too cold, and with the thickness of the oil that they use, it can have some trouble. So just give it some time, start it 3 or 4 times and see what happens. I had to barely crack the throttle open on the KTM to get it to fire up. But once I did that, it fired up pretty much every time. Let's see. Let's talk about the engine. And I know I said I wouldn't do specs, and I'm not, but commuting and using the bike every day, this engine is absolutely fantastic. You honestly can't beat a twin on the street. There's just so much torque, and it's everywhere. Like 4th or 5th gear, even 6th gear, you can just roll on, and just be passing people with ease. It is so simple and so straightforward. You can literally just crack the throttle. I'm in 4th. It just takes off, and it's absolutely fucking awesome. Because I just pretty much keep it in 4th or 5th my entire commute, with the odd wheelie in 3rd thrown in, and I'm good to go. I don't have to think, I just crack the throttle and go. And for commuting, when you're just trying to get to point A to point B, that's absolutely fantastic. Now, as far as like track days and stuff, I've done 6 track days on this motorcycle this year already, and it it leaves a little to be desired. It is kind of like using a sledgehammer to hit a drywall nail. It gets the job done, but it's not perfect. The bike is more than capable of it, and more than capable than but the chassis is so soft. Even with the Adriani cartridge kit and the Öhlins TTX shock I have in here, the chassis is still very wallowy, and that's part of what makes it so fun to ride, is that, you know, it just fucking wheelies everywhere. And when you're trying to put down fast lap times, because I mean, I'm not very quick, I'm mid to upper pack I group, that's not very fast at all. It leaves a little to be desired because it just is overly wallowy and wheelies everywhere. That could be fixed. I could probably throw some stiffer springs in here, but that is a winter project for sure. But it's an absolute blast on track. So if you're somebody who's not necessarily racing and doesn't really care about lap times, which I don't really, I do it for fun, and just being able to track my lap times is more for fun than anything else, and to know how I'm improving. But if you're somebody who's, you know, maybe done the racing scene and doesn't necessarily care, then the KTM is an absolutely fantastic bike on track. The brakes are wonderful, the power's awesome, you're easily the fastest thing out there from corner exit. You know, the super bikes will catch you down the straight, but whatever, you have the power literally everywhere else. And you know, it tips in really easily. It honestly is a good track bike. It's in the right hands. You just have to learn to take advantage of the strengths, which, since I'm slow, I don't know how to do, honestly. Mountains and twisties, absolutely fantastic. The bike is made for the twisties. It is sublime to ride in the mountains when you're not necessarily pushing it to its max, and you shouldn't be anyways. But you know, every now and then you just want to give it a little squirt, and the bike absolutely loves it. Absolutely loves it. It constantly wheelies out of the corners. It's a blast to ride, and you know, on the street you can keep up with your friends that have super bikes, no problem. No problem at all. You'll really only notice you'll only notice a difference, I would say, from like you'll only really notice a difference from, I would say, maybe $130 and up when they start to hit their power band. But even then, after that, this thing still pulls. It's relentless. So on the street and in the twisties, this motorcycle is absolutely fantastic. There's really no fault to it at all. Let's talk about reliability. So this is where those issues that I was talking about come into play. The LC8 motor is mechanically sound. It is reliable. You really aren't going to have any issues with the drivetrain itself. The issues start to come into play with the electronics. This motorcycle is very smart. Very, very smart. Almost too smart for its own good. It has ambient air temp sensors. It has water temp sensors. It has oil temp sensors. It's got, you know, 6-axis IMU, the traction control, the ABS, all that jazz that makes it absolutely sublime to ride, and the safety systems are fantastic. But because there's so much electronics in this thing, they typically can go wrong. My ambient air temp sensor usually cuts in and out, so like right now it says it's 60 and now 84, and then sometimes it just cuts out completely. It's not a big deal. You just don't get a temp readout for how hot it is outside or how cold it is, which is whatever, you know, who cares. But if it does shut off, it'll say, you know, it'll throw an error code, and that error code is right down there, that little orange triangle. So I mean, you're just gonna have to live with it, and that's one of those things that was like, and yours may not do it. KTM seems to be hit and miss on what problems you have and what problems you won't have. It's really just up in the air almost. So if you can look past that, you know, you have a fantastic bike on your hands. And the same can be said, the oil temp sensors on these things are known to go in and out as well. But when they go out, you get a check engine light. And honestly, it doesn't affect anything at all. The motor still pulls, the bike runs absolutely fine, but you just don't get an oil temp readout, and that could be frustrating. It's not necessarily like the biggest problem, but excuse me, but you know, you get a check engine light. So if you're somebody who freaks out and takes your bike to the dealer the second you get a check engine light, maybe this bike isn't for you, because they're going to be thrown often, and they come and go with seemingly no notice. and with no rhyme or reason. So, you know, it's just the name of the game. And you may pick up a Super Duke that has absolutely zero problems. The only major reliability issue that I've had, well, there's two. The only major issues that I've had are the kickstand side switch, and you can either just buy a bypass, which I did, and I carry with me just in case it happens again, because then I could just, you know, put the bypass on. But mine took on water, and then that caused the pins to kind of corrode a little bit, which caused the contact between the pins to, you know, the contact in the switch to not work. So the bike would just cut out. But it's an easy fix, and I knew what the problem was right away, because the bike wouldn't start in first, but would start in neutral. But the second I put it into first, the bike would cut out. So that's obviously the kickstand side switch. Even if it was up all the way, you know, it's the first thing you check. But once I figured that out, it was simple. It was quite simple. You open the sprocket cover, pull the side switch out, clean it out, pack it, fill it with some dielectric grease. Not like pack it, but, you know, just get some on there and you're good to go. And the bike ran absolutely fine after that. The other massive issue that these bikes have, and some people never have this issue, others like me have experienced it 2 to 3 times already. And that's going to be radiators. They crack. KTM can't design a radiator to save their life, in all honesty. It's been the same design since 2014, and every year, to my knowledge, has had this problem. I don't know about the 2020s and up, though. So, but that bike is almost completely different from the 14 to 19 generation. So, if you're buying a 2020, I mean, you can kind of throw half the stuff I'm saying out the window, because it is a wildly different motorcycle. It's been completely redesigned. They took weight away nearly everywhere. The geometry and handling has been changed massively. There's tons of changes. So the radiators tend to crack, and that is because of the design. There's a fantastic video on YouTube by some older guy in like a race jumpsuit, and he describes the issue perfectly well, and it makes sense when he describes it. But because of the way the tank is held on and the way the radiator is mounted, it essentially allows it to pull itself apart, and they usually crack at the mounts, the top mounts. And it's exacerbated by wheelies. So if you're somebody who does a lot of wheelies and then just lets the bike slam down, your radiator is probably going to crack very quickly. So if you're doing a wheelie, set it down gently, as you should always be doing. But it does have, like the radiator does crack. The one on this one has cracked 2 times now at this point. It cracked before I purchased it, and the previous owner had it remedied. The bike was still under warranty, so everything was Gucci. And then it cracked on me at about, I think, 10,000 miles. So I bought an eBay radiator, a Chinesium one, threw it in there. I haven't had any problems since. Knock on wood. This is plastic, but you get the idea. So it's hit or miss. You could experience the issue, you could not. And worst comes to worst, you know, I just keep throwing Chinese radiators in there. And a radiator is a radiator in my mind, and you know, it's so far the eBay one has been absolutely fine. Let's talk about fit and finish. So there's a couple parts on here that do rust. The shift linkage, the lock nut that holds it on, has started to rust a little bit. It's not like, it's mostly surface rust. Like, it's not pitted and completely corroded and it's not pitted and corroded and disgusting. So evidently we're doing 35 miles an hour in a 45. And this is that torque that I'm talking about. It's just so effortless. You just roll on and go. But fit and finish, yeah, there are some bolts that rust, especially if you ride year round. That salt that puts on the road, if you're in an area that gets snow and they salt the roads, it will take an effect on the hard parts of the bike. So you just have to learn to take care of it, and, you know, wash the bike off and do your typical checkovers and maintenance. far as daily maintenance, kind of the day-to-day, the thing you're going to go through most often is tires, honestly. Specifically rear tires. My front has, I think, 2 track days on it and a couple thousand street miles, and there is absolutely, it still could go another couple thousand more. The rear, not so much. But the rear wheel, the single-sided swing arm design is absolutely so easy to get the rear wheel off. You just pull the exhaust and then crack the nut and the wheel comes off, and then to put it on, it's just like a car wheel. You line up the holes and tighten it down and you're good to go. I'm laughing because it's hilariously easy compared to removing a wheel with, you know, a double-sided swing arm and having to kind of, you know, remove the chain, line everything back up, struggle. Whereas this, you just put it on and go. It's laughably easy. Same for if you have to do any, like, hats off to KTM for making this motorcycle so easy to work on. Like, it is stupid easy with 2 O's. Stupid with 2 O's, easy to work on. I clean the air filter because I have an aftermarket one, and to most bikes, to remove the tank, you don't have a lot of room to play with. You undo the bolts that hold it on, and then there's barely enough cable to lift it up, so then you have to stick your hand under the tank and disconnect the clips. You don't have to do that with this bike. This bike, you lift the tank up, rotate it, and put it on the back seat. That's it. There's no removal of the tank, and that is excellent to see because you don't have to worry about fuel dripping. You don't have to worry about any of that because the tank just rotates around because they gave you enough hose and cable to do it. Like, this bike is so easy. And then if you're afraid of, you know, maybe not necessarily having the right Torx bit for something, most of the fasteners on this motorcycle that are Torx are also metric sockets. Like, as somebody who does nearly all their own maintenance, the only thing I won't do is, you know, break open the engine and check the valves. I refuse to do that because I'm scared. But as somebody who works on their motorcycle 99% of the time, KTM made it dumb easy to do, and that's absolutely fantastic to see from a consumer standpoint, that a manufacturer has taken the thought to make it easy to work on. The manual's awesome too. If you want to replace a piston, the manual shows you how to do it. Why would you want to replace a piston on your own? No idea, but the manuals tell you how to do it. Let's talk about fueling, since that is, you know, something that is very, very common. Meaning that you're either always on the gas or off the gas. Fueling on this motorcycle is fantastic. It is one of the smoothest bikes that I've ever had the pleasure to ride. The on-off throttle is fantastic. The throttle response is incredible. And I have a lot of work done to my bike. I have the Rottweiler Stage 5 kit that I think it's Rennie Scarsborough had, and the Pikes Peak win that he had on this bike back in 2017. It's got a power commander, it's got an aftermarket air filter, it's got all kinds of goodies to help make this bike make power and improve the fueling. That being said, I have ridden a stock Super Duke, and the fueling on that was excellent as well. It was a 2020, but the motor is more or less the same principle. You know, it's tons of torque, but the fueling on that was fantastic as well. It is the smoothest motorcycle I have ever ridden, bar none. Maybe not better than a BMW S1000R, single R. I rode a 2014, but the fueling on this bike is absolutely perfect. I've never had any issues at all. I will say though, if you have a shorter muffler, and that might have just been the tune I had, the fueling can be a little rough when using the quick shifter and blipper. And as soon as I switched back to a longer muffler, problem went away. Solved. Super smooth. Can use the quick shifter without any front wheel push or any cutout or nothing. Works perfect. So keep that in mind as well. let's talk about brakes. Brakes are absolutely fantastic. Brembo M50s, I highly recommend throwing some aftermarket brake pads in, though. I'm currently running the DP X-Race Titanium line. They're technically a race pad, but they don't require nearly any brake-in, and they don't really require any heat to work either. It's just instant bite, true finger, one finger braking. So they're absolutely awesome. Just keep up to date on bleeding the system and you'll be good to go, honestly. The dash does this cool thing where, ice warning, see, that's my air temp cutting in and out. The fuel gauge works okay. I'm trying to wrap it up, so I'm trying to, you know, like shotgun approach anything else that I've noticed over the last 9 months, I think. So the fuel gauge works okay. It works great up until you get to about the last 3 bars, and then it kind of jumps around saying you have fuel, you don't have fuel. It throws the warning. Honestly, when I'm commuting, I'm getting about 140 miles to the tank before I, like, you know, at that point I'm like finding a gas station. I'm actively searching. So the fuel mileage on this thing is absolutely fantastic. When commuting, I generally average about 42 or so, and then on track I'm doing like 23, and that's really good compared to the MT10 I had on track. I was lucky to see 15 miles to the gallon, honestly. You are one guys that track your motorcycles, you feel the pain as well. Yeah, if you track your motorcycle, you know the pain. You go through gas in a snap, in an instant, and especially if you have an R1 or an MT10, those things are thirsty bitches. Thirsty bitches. I think on track I averaged about like 11 miles to the gallon on the MT10, and usually it's at around 9 or 10. So 23 on this thing is a godsend. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got for you guys. If you're considering this motorcycle, just go out and fucking do it. It is absolutely the best thing that I've ever swung a leg over, and I really do mean that. It puts a smile on my face every time I get on the gas. Every time I turn the bike on, it's absolutely fantastic. So yeah, that's all I got. Take care.